I'm just noting what's super obvious. That's the caldera of a volcano like this Yellowstone thing. We thought it was just this crazy place with hot springs, but no, that's a supervolcano. That is a continent killer, a sleeping beast about to awake, and I'm merely calling for an acknowledgement of what we're watching. We're talking about a 100-foot wide crack that's appeared on the supervolcano underneath Yellowstone National Park. Guess what? Scientists warn us this drastic change has amplified Yellowstone's sudden eruption risk by a whopping 320%, and when it happens, it'll be a catastrophe. So, let's dive right in and uncover all the details. Norris Geyser Basin and Steamboat are contributing to the increased risk. But before we get into the details, let's get you brushed up with some facts. So, for starters, we're venturing into the heart of Yellowstone's oldest thermal sanctuary, the Norris Geyser Basin, a blistering region with thermal features dating back a jaw-dropping 115,000 years. Here, the temperature dares to scale to an astonishing 459 degrees Fahrenheit just 1,000 feet beneath the surface. But there's more. Here resides the Steamboat Geyser, a true testament to Yellowstone's dynamic landscape. This towering 400-foot tall geyser used to be a rare spectacle, erupting occasionally with unpredictable pauses stretching between 4 days to 50 years. But hold on, the game changed in March 2018. Now, Steamboat struts its grandeur as often as once a week. Its 32 eruptions in 2018 shattered previous records, only to outdo itself with an astonishing 48 eruptions the following year. Which begs the question, is this linked to the increase in the sudden eruption risk by 320%? Let's find out. As it turns out, the geyser's erratic behavior is merely a fraction of the story. Scientists are captivated by the rhythmic dance of the basin itself. In an 8-year span from 1996, an 18-meter-long strip rose nearly 5 inches only to dip back down by almost 3 inches in the next 8 years. Then, out of nowhere, it surged up again at an unprecedented pace of almost 6 inches a year. A powerful 4.9 magnitude earthquake shook the basin in March 2014, stalling this relentless uplift. Since then, the ground has oscillated between sinking and rising until 2019, when it finally began to descend. Yet today, the basin sits proud, standing about 5 inches taller than it did in 2000. But can there be another factor contributing to the 320% increase, you wonder? Well, the hint is a supervolcano. Supervolcano means super destruction. A supervolcano eruption under Yellowstone National Park would be unlike anything the world has ever witnessed. The biggest natural threat to human existence on Earth is posed by the 20 supervolcanoes that exist. The Yellowstone supervolcano has only erupted 3 times in the past 2.1 million years despite scoring an 8 out of 8 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index. The 4th time might be sooner than you think. A 640,000-year-old eruption was the most recent. According to volcanologists, when that happens, an explosion will release toxic gas that would destroy crops and disrupt electricity supplies all the way to the Midwest. The United States would then experience insanely cold temperatures as a poisonous cloud would block the sun for years. It will be the greatest catastrophe since the dawn of civilization, according to the European Science Foundation. The worst part, cracks have started to appear. Literally, in 2018, Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming closed down because of a massive crack due to a potential safety issue. Hidden Falls and Inspiration Point were closed, and park rangers carried out a risk assessment process. A source at the U.S. Geological Survey claims that the rock face crack is a typical rockfall-rated risk. The Yellowstone supervolcano, which last erupted hundreds of years ago, hurled 240 cubic miles of rock, ash, and volcanic dust into the sky, as well as leaving a 34x 50-mile depression in the ground. It's close to Grand Teton National Park. We're talking about a 100-foot wide supervolcano threat crack. Folks, supervolcanoes are an ultra-catastrophe that poses the threat of wiping out humanity. Just like asteroids and nuclear or biological warfare, the world might be destroyed by the eruption. But is this being taken as seriously as it should be? Nope. There will probably never be a year in which no one dies in an aviation accident. But there will never be a year in which a single plane crash kills 10% of the world's population. In contrast to volcanic programs, the Federal Aviation Administration spends more than $7 billion a year on aviation safety, even though supervolcanoes will kill considerably more people than plane catastrophes over the long term. We have the ability to stop these terrible catastrophes, but we choose to ignore them, and by doing this, we expose ourselves to dangers we cannot anticipate. A massive active volcano is directly over Yellowstone National Park. Pay close attention to this. Although Yellowstone has been a national park since 1872, scientists didn't completely understand the volcano's size until the 1960s. They also didn't understand that it was fully living and still posed a threat of a catastrophic eruption until the 1980s. Yellowstone has eruptions that can be thousands of times more powerful than the 1980 Mount St. Helens explosion. Several feet of ash would cover the northern Rockies. Almost everyone in the United States would be covered with ash. Now, geologists are curious to know what exactly is going on beneath all those hot springs and geysers of the national park. They naturally want to know whether Yellowstone will erupt again, when it will, and how badly. A giant eruption would be a low probability, high consequence event, the archetypal black swan with potential to have an impact on both society and the Earth, but it hasn't been ruled out completely. The issue for scientists is that these massive supervolcano eruptions are extremely unusual, and the most important thing to identify is hidden kilometers below the surface and involves chaotic forces, intricate chemistry, and mysterious geological features. Recently, the hidden architecture of Yellowstone was revealed by a research team. They simulated how lava rises from the center of the Earth and forms two sizable chambers of partially melted rock beneath the park's surface. These two magma chambers are piled one on top of the other, and there is non-melted rock between them. The lava emerging from the mantle of the Earth flows freely and contains little gas. The layer, whose top is roughly 6 miles below the surface, is created when it cools and hardens as it strikes a relatively cold crust. The upper magma chamber, which is located on top of the sill, is filled with explosively sticky magma that stores a lot of gas. It's comparable to a shaken, unopened soda. Can you know how that goes? The new study, published in Geophysical Research Letters, describes how this two-tiered, geochemically varied architecture might have developed over time. One day, we may get a model snapshot showing the system as it will appear when there has been sufficient melting to cause a significant eruption. Their model is interesting because it allows them to go through time and determine how eruption rates might have been affected many millions of years ago. The latest discovery supports past studies on the twin magma chambers bubbling under the park. Geologists also measured the speed at which seismic waves from mild earthquakes move through the subsurface rock using sensors positioned all over Yellowstone. Through heated and partially melted rock structures, these waves move more slowly. So, scientists were able to create an MRI-like image of the two magma chambers using the data. It's worth mentioning that supervolcano is not a technical term. Yellowstone is referred to as a caldera, a volcano that forms calderas. Basically, a volcano that forms a sizable crater is called a caldera, and these are mountain-eating occurrences. Yep, you heard that right. In fact, on the map provided to visitors to Yellowstone, which depicts the outline of the most recent caldera, it can be seen that the park's central region is unusually devoid of mountains. They either fell into the large hole or were blasted away. The first major eruption in the Yellowstone region happened around 2.1 million years ago, and the most recent one was 63,000 years ago. Is the fourth one upon us? With a whopping 320% risk increase, it might just be. Then again, who can accurately predict how much magma is required to start a caldera-forming eruption? But until then, don't think nothing's happening within the Yellowstone system, as relatively minor eruptions that produce lava flows are quite frequent. The latest occurred 70,000 years ago, and Yellowstone is due to erupt catastrophically. But you see, volcanoes don't act in predictable machine-like ways, and that alone should be a massive concern for us all. Oh, and by the way, Yellowstone is not the only caldera in the country. The Long Valley Caldera in California, next to the well-known ski resort of Mammoth Mountain, is one of several worth mentioning. The U.S. Geological Survey conducts just that. It is located just east of Yosemite National Park and erupted about 700,000 years ago. So, even though a large eruption is rare, it could still have minor eruptions that are very disruptive and deadly, and which might even be causing the increased risk of a sudden eruption. In fact, California has 7 volcanic areas with molten rock zones underneath the surface. On the San Andreas Fault, a magnitude 6 or bigger earthquake is about as likely to occur in California as a volcanic eruption. Now you must be wondering what would happen if this supervolcano did erupt. First, an insane amount of ash and sulfur would be thrown into the air. In turn, that might ruin crops and potentially change the environment. We know that because the enormous Mount Tambora eruption in 2015 caused agricultural failures, harsh weather, and a drop in world temperatures. The magma bubbling underneath Yellowstone is a powerful heat source, which is why there are so many beautiful